It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH and our sister podcast, Moving to Live, firmly believe movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not just an activity. That's why, in addition to our weekly podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, FitLabPGH releases movement tip and lifestyle hack videos. And every Thursday, we do a written FitLab Pittsburgh features of a two-legged or four-legged mover in the Pittsburgh area. If you like what we're doing, leave us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're listening to. Drop us a message and give us ideas. Remember, treat movement as a lifestyle, not just an activity. Move more, move often, and listen to our latest podcast. FitLabPGH back with another podcast interview. This time we did not have to go over a bridge or through a tunnel, and I have not told today's guest, but it has to be a good interview because we're in a coffee shop, and we have yet to do an interview in a coffee shop where it hasn't been a good interview. So we are fortunate enough to have Amy Camp of Cycle Forward here, and I would be remiss if I did not thank Sara Petyk of Noble Invention Bike Touring, who, when I interviewed her early this past summer, said, one of the people you need to interview is Amy. I contacted Amy. She got back to me quite quickly and said, I'd love to do it, but I can't do it until like November because I'm doing a lot of traveling. So sometimes it takes a while to get an interview, but if somebody is willing to do it, we'll hunt them down and continue to bother them until they say, okay, I'll do it to get rid of you. Amy, thanks for taking time out of your morning to talk to FitLabPGH.
Oh, my pleasure, Ben. Good to be here.
We always like to find out the stories of our listeners, but before we do that, I'm a cyclist at heart, and that's my main project or my main thing that I enjoy doing for moving. Before we find out how you got to this point sitting at a Starbucks in the South Side, you see somebody, you've got a Cycle Forward t-shirt or a hat on, and what's your very quick 30-second definition of what Cycle Forward is? We'll talk more about that later in the interview.
Sure. Cycle Forward is actually less about cycling than you might think. I got to developing my business because I have a history of working in communities along rail trails, and I continue to do so. Essentially what Cycle Forward is I help communities to understand the benefits of trails and green spaces and how to better connect to them. And then on the other side of my business, I offer nature-based coaching held outside on trails, and that's typically walking rather than cycling.
And I know we've talked in the past about things like nature baths and living near the ocean. And I know working with communities, you see Pittsburgh with all the rails to trails around here. I just recently read an article about Bentonville, Arkansas, that has embraced mountain biking and hiking trails and has really changed the outlook of the town. It's become a huge tourist area. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's there are stories like that all over the world, all over North America. The outdoor economy is a real thing, and communities and small businesses are seeing the benefits. And that's why I enjoy doing what I do. Is it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination at this point in time for communities to see their potential space in the outdoor economy. And, trails play a big role in that.
And I think what's interesting is in the last day or two on the Montour Trail Facebook page, somebody had put together a video showing the history of the Montour Trail. And we have interviewed people, and, if you told people 30 years ago, hey, there's going to be this great trail system in Pittsburgh, they probably would have looked at you and said, you're crazy.
They would, yeah. And that's so universal with trails. If you talk to the folks at the Rails to Trails Conservancy, they have heard it all. I mean, people are worried about their privacy. They're worried about crime along trails, and all of these things. The people historically have lacked the vision to see that long distance trails are possible and connecting networks of trails to each other is possible, but that's what's happening now in the world of trails.
And I know, as somebody who is not a Pittsburgh native, one of my favorite questions to always ask the people that we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you still here? And if you're not, what brought you to Pittsburgh and keeps you here?
Yeah, I am native to the region. I grew up about an hour north of Pittsburgh, and what keeps me here? I just love this place. I was always drawn to the city, as a child and growing up, and sort of knew that, I would make my way, to becoming, a city dweller. But I love the region as a whole. Great people here. It's pretty easy to get access to the outdoors. And I'm actually, you asked earlier about, how we came to be sitting in this coffee shop. I'm a resident of the South Side. My wife and I moved here a couple of years ago. And just being here in this city neighborhood that is one of our flat neighborhoods in Pittsburgh has improved my own, walkability and my own quality of life being here.
And I know we actually interviewed somebody a couple of years ago who lived on Mount Washington, and he was retired, but for 35 or 40 years when he was working, he worked on the north side, and every day he walked or rode his bike to work. And just to hear him talk about how it had changed and how enjoyable it was to walk and see the seasons, I think people who don't do that really are missing out. And people like you with your coaching business are introducing people, say, hey, being outside can actually be a lot of fun, even if it's 25 degrees out and snowing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have 4 great seasons. Winter can get to be a bit long and dreary at times, but, it still can be a beautiful time of year. And to your point about walking, even though my business is named Cycle Forward, my favorite way of being outside is by foot. I enjoy the pace of walking or hiking, and I feel that, first of all, if you're on a bike, you see more than you do if you're in a car. And if you're on foot, I think you see even more, and you get to just slow down and really observe what's around you.
And I'm curious, you say you have a background in making communities aware of the opportunities. One of the things that always interests me in both FitLab Pittsburgh and Moving to Live is finding out people's stories of how they got to that point. Does somebody, when they're a little girl growing up north of Pittsburgh, saying, I want to teach people how they can use trails and how trails can be a part of a community? How did you get to the point where you were working in that field?
Wow, I had no idea when I was growing up that I would be in the position that I am today. No idea that this was even a career option. Whenever I was a kid, I loved to be outside. I was a kid that loved to play outside in the woods and also played a lot of sports and everything. But it wasn't until I was nearing the end of my undergrad that I realized I don't really know what I want to do, but I'm kind of interested in helping to improve communities. And so I was directed then by a mentor to University of Pittsburgh, where I went to the GISPIA program to be trained in urban planning, and that's how I ended up working actually here in the South Side. That was my first job out of college, was doing community development, helping to market this neighborhood. And then about another 5 or 6 years later, I started working in rural communities and small towns along the Great Allegheny Passage, helping those communities to better connect to that trail. So it definitely wasn't a straight path, just to use a metaphor there. But but I somehow ended up in this space where I get to help communities and also be connected to trails and the outdoors.
And I'm curious because I know you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, your business kind of has two heads. When you go to these communities, do they contact you? Do you reach out to them? Does a Rails to Trails organization or an organization that has trails say, hey, Amy, we'd like your company to go talk to these communities? How does that work?
It's definitely a niche business, and it's a word of mouth business. I often am contacted by people that maybe I've met at a conference or I know professionally to do a project or to go to a community to do a workshop. And a lot of my business is return business as well. So it's definitely not something where I'm out looking for it. Not that I'm not ever looking for work, but it's just that's not the way. It's not a cold call kind of thing.
And just in general terms, when a community contacts you, what do they expect, or what are they? Because I know Rails to Trails are becoming more popular, and for somebody like you who spent all your life outdoors, it's probably like, well, yeah, of course you want to do something like this. But for other people in the community, you mentioned some of the things or some of the reasons why people may not want trails, as far as crime rate, property values going down. Maybe they think this is going to be a path where there's going to be a lot of motorcyclists and four-wheelers, and there's going to be lots of noise. When you go into these communities, you often have to explain to people these are the benefits, or are there often people in the communities who bring you in and say, hey, we know what the benefits are, we just think it's going to look better if we get an expert who can actually give us solid information? So somebody says, oh, well, that's Amy saying that, and she's an expert versus my next door neighbor.
Yeah, I think that's half of what it is having somebody from another place come in and say the same things that you were saying already. A lot of my clients will tell me that. Like, I've been saying this for years, but it makes a difference whenever somebody comes from another area, somebody who's perceived as being a subject matter expert. The thing with the work that I do not in terms of the benefits of trails, but in terms of working with trail towns and helping towns to better connect to their trail. I really think I was in the right place at the right time. Whenever the Trail Town initiative was formed, I was a part of the staff that implemented that first program. And, just the fact that I was, one of the first people in this kind of work, allows me to go to different places. I do my work throughout the U.S. and Canada, and it's just, like you said, helping people just to allowing people to hear from a different person with a different background, really.
And I know one of the things that I'm always looking for is places for adventure. So if you think back on your work, if there's one area that you've worked in and you said, I've got a week free and I can go someplace on vacation, is there one place that sticks in your mind, or do you not want me to put you on the spot like that?
No, I don't mind at all. I was in Prince Edward Island this fall and loved it there. I would love to be able to go back and spend some time as a traveler. I also have been to Nova Scotia and would like to get back there to spend some more time. I'm really drawn to Atlantic Canada, which is one of the places where I have business relationships. So just need to get back there while I'm not working sometime.
And I know one of the people I interviewed for my other podcast, Moving to Live, Don Moxley, said when he accepted a job in Florida, one of the non-conditional things that he had, or unconditional requirements that he had, is he was going to live near the water, because I know there's some research out there that can improve quality of life and mental health. Do you think part of your attraction towards the Nova Scotia area and Prince Edward Island area is because the Atlantic Ocean is pretty striking when you're there? Do you think that's just, you look at it, it's like, for you, that's one of the things like, boy, this really feels good?
That might be a part of it. Whether it's the ocean or one of the bays or whatever. Like, I think we're drawn to water. Although there's research out there around different people are drawn to different types of nature, right? Some people may be drawn to the water. Others might want to just sit along a mountain stream, right?
And that would be me. I know people always say, oh, why don't you want to go to the beach? It's like, I'd rather go to the mountains. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just the mountains are what I'm drawn to.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I even think sometimes about the audible part of that. I mean, do you like to hear the stream trickling, or are you a person that likes to hear the waves lapping, like that repetitive, kind of rhythm? And it's really becomes interesting when you start to think about that and to talk to people about what exactly they're drawn to.
I know one of the things I mentioned to you we do for FitLab Pittsburgh is we do movement, tip, and lifestyle hack videos, and I'm always amazed when I go back and listen to the ones that we do with my dogs in the park or in the woods. When I'm in the woods, sometimes I don't realize that you hear the birds or you hear the mountain stream, and then you hear it on the recording from the iPhone, and it's like, oh, wow, I need to start paying attention more. Mm-hmm. We took a picture of the dogs this morning, and we're participating in a virtual 20K dog walking running thing with a Northeast Canine Conditioning. And I posted a picture on the Facebook group, and one of the people responded, that looks like a really nice trail. I went back and looked at the picture and was like, I really need to start concentrating more rather than hanging with the dogs and just being, because some of the scenery you miss out on unless you go back and look at it. And I'm sure that's the same with the pictures that you take for your job or with your other side of your business. You go back and go, wow, I never noticed that when I was working.
Yeah, right. And I think that's a good opening for me to talk a little bit about the other side of my business, which is nature-based coaching. And what that means for me is I take individuals who are pursuing life coaching or professional coaching outside onto trails for those conversations. And I also take groups out for programs that I organize because I believe really strongly that nature is a powerful space, and that people are full of potential. And whenever you, go out into that space, that really amazing things can happen. And because if you're out there thinking about what matters to you and what you're doing with your life, what better space than to be outside in nature? And we could just be moving right along, walking through and treating it as a fitness walk, right? But I think it becomes important to, instead get centered and to really, help my clients and the people that are with me on programs to notice what's happening around them and to really draw from the space, because that's why we're there after all.
And I know I think it's the Japanese, they have the nature baths where they just teach, just go in the woods without a goal and either walk slowly or just sit and notice things. And I know one of the things for a variety of people I've interviewed for both my podcasts is when we talk about the outdoors, and a lot of them are, we talk about exercising outdoors, but it could just be sitting. There's the comment that you don't recognize that if you're in a more urban space, there's always some sort of noise, whether it's visual, auditory, or even like we're sitting here in Southside, and when a fire truck went by, you could hear the vibrations from the truck. And I'm curious, is one of the reasons you picked to have your coaching business where you take your clients outside is because it gave them an opportunity to get away from all that, for lack of a better term, noise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons. Like right now, you and I are sitting across from each other, and we're pretty focused on each other, like, making eye contact and everything. And
the headphones help.
The headphones help. And one thing that I like about walking outside with people, and that people have commented on, is that they like that we're sort of moving together, we're in motion together, and that they're sort of off the hook a little bit in terms of just having that direct focus. We can look back and forth to each other, but we're really in a space that's bigger than us, and we're physically moving and making progress while they're also making progress and thinking about what they want out of their own lives. And so there's something that's just nice about being able to do that. And then of course we stop and we notice, and we take the appropriate breaks and everything to observe what's happening. And I know you're a dog lover, and I always tell my clients and people on programs it's always okay to stop and take dog petting breaks. And but yeah, I mean, going back to your original question, a big part of it is just noticing what's so special about the space, because it helps us. And our blood pressure is lower, and our anxiety is lowered, and we become more creative when we're outside. There's research around all of it. It's just a fantastic space to spend time with people.
And it's actually, I was walking my dogs in the woods when I came up with the idea for FitLab Pittsburgh. So I'm a practical N of one for what you're saying and what I agree with also. I think it's also interesting. I know in the medical field, we interviewed Dr. Justin Berthold, and he mentioned that sometimes with his patients, if it's possible, he takes them out and he goes for a walk with them because it's easier to have a conversation, whereas you said they're doing something else. And he credits Dr. Gary Chimes, who was his residency director, for teaching that. And I know there are some physicians who are practicing that. And I'm curious, you've done a really good job of describing how you got into working with river towns. How did you get in this other head or this other side of your business of doing coaching or working with people to make them better parts of themselves?
Mm-hmm. So throughout my career, I found that I always enjoyed working with interns and colleagues and friends around, their own professional growth and fulfillment, career decisions, that sort of thing. And so I think maybe about 7 years ago, I decided I'm going to look into professional coaching. So I got my certification through Duquesne University and loved the program. And I just had a hunch that it would work to take people outside, and explored with that early on as I was also building my coaching skills, and made a deliberate decision to make it nature-based because, most coaching is not held outside. It's just typically done differently. And then something that I did a couple of years ago was make a decision to work with groups more and to get people out for programs. Typically women, men are usually invited to my programs, but a lot of the time it's just, women that respond to my offerings. And so I hold different programs that are either nature-based and held outside, or sometimes just, nature-themed and, held inside.
I know one of the things that you often talk about when you talk about people who are entrepreneurs is if you're going to do something, do it better than somebody or do it differently. And it sounds like whether it was purposefully or accidentally, you fell into that niche of saying, hey, this outside thing is a little bit different than what a lot of other coaching programs are. And it kind of brings me to a great question for educating FitLab Pittsburgh listeners. It's very easy, especially with social media, to throw around different terms. But you mentioned that you got a coaching certification from Duquesne University. I think it would be interesting to listeners to explain, what exactly is a life coach, and what was the training that you had from Duquesne that allowed you to do that?
Right. So a life coach, and there are a lot of different terms for it, right? But that's the most recognizable term for people. But a professional coach or a life coach is somebody who is able to work with people to help them to make progress in whatever it is that they're seeking to make progress around. It's an objective listener, typically a trained listener who can, help their clients to make change and to have a shift in perspective around who they are and what their life circumstances are. And it's very strength based, helping people to understand their strengths and their values and how to use their strengths every day and in their own interests. And, just to quickly answer your question about the Duquesne program, what that looks like, it's about a 7-month program where you're being trained in the classroom as well as online, and you are being coached and you're also coaching and learning. It's a really immersive, great program. I loved it.
And I know we've talked a lot about some of the advantages or benefits you get psychologically and physically from being outside. You think at some point, just from recognizing the benefits you got from being outside, that kind of lit the fire or made your memory say, hey, this coaching thing, if I take people outside, it takes away some of that noise. It makes them more comfortable because they're focusing maybe on the bird that's picking a worm out of it. And maybe I can be more productive as a coach or be a better coach because I can get them to focus more because they're not trying to focus on the cars, the noise, and the other things.
Right. That's a great question. I don't know quite if it was all of my own time out there or my, with my consulting business, being aware of the benefits. I'm not quite sure what that first thing was that made me say, I'm going to try it. But, I've been on that track for, about 6 years now of getting people outside for coaching. But even before that, I was taking people out as a volunteer for Venture Outdoors, taking people out for bike rides and hikes, and getting groups of friends out. And, I think it's just such a wonderful space to be with other people, whether it's, going for a walk with a friend or, having a walking meeting instead of sitting down in an office space. It's awesome to be outside, don't you think?
I would agree 100%. I'm curious with the clients that you've had. Do you ever have any that contact you or potential clients that say, hey, I've looked at your website, which we'll have in the show notes. It sounds interesting, but I'm not really an outside person. Kind of convince me why should I do this, or why is this better? Have you had that experience?
No, I don't think so. I have the opposite experience where somebody will say I was interested in coaching, and I see that you coach outside. To my knowledge, I'm the only nature-based coach in the region, and I think people see that, and then at that point, it becomes a matter of chemistry and pricing and whether or not they want to move forward with me, right? I mean, they also have to like me and think that I can help them, but there's usually just this magic that's, around, like they also appreciate the outdoors and they already know it.
And I know you mentioned you do individual coaching and group coaching. How does the group coaching work? Is it a group of people come to you, or is it you have various people say, boy, I'd like to do this, but I don't want a one-on-one, and you kind of combine the group yourself?
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to get too deep into like definitions or anything, but there is something that is called group coaching, and what I do is not pure group coaching, right? That would be working with an already defined group and coaching them on something. Whenever I take groups out, it's sort of like a coaching inspired kind of like program. For example, I did one a couple of times called Gremlins in the Woods in Frick Park, and that was being outside in a park setting, but thinking about our own personal gremlins, our inner critic, right? So it's sort of like a coach style discussion, but it's a program. Or another one, I for REI have done an outdoor adventure vision board workshop at the beginning of the year, and I'll be doing one again in January. So that's one that's really, it's not coaching, but it's helping people to think about what matters to them in terms of their relationship to the outdoors, and how can they envision that and make it a reality.
And I would say some people might argue that is coaching. It's a specialized type, maybe outside of the traditional academic definition of it.
Yeah, some people might.
We've had the good fortune to be talking with Amy Camp of Cycle Forward. We'll have show notes, and we really appreciate Sara Petyk recommending her. Amy, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about Cycle Forward and the work you do with trail towns and also coaching people in the outdoors.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.